Okay, hey guys, we're going to finish the last unit of chapter 1. It's perimeter, area, and circumference. You may think this is really easy, we've done this before, but we just want to make sure before we really jump into the major topics of geometry that we have all these basics covered. So let's start off with here's my marker. Let's just start off with the basics. First thing is perimeter. And so we know from your once again this is previous knowledge. The perimeter is the sum of the sides. Or you know it as distance around the figure. And so we have here, we have this, I'm going to leave it here because I don't want to talk about area, but we have this, this figure, and, sorry, and, the question is what is the perimeter? So we walk around and go, it's 4, 4, 4, 4. So it's 4, 4, 4, 4. So we say that the perimeter is 4 units. Sometimes you might get a weird figure. Something that looks like this. Kind of looks like this. You can make any figure you want, but the idea is it's the sum of the sides. The perimeter is the sum of the sides. And so once again, you're imagining that you're taking a walk along the figure and you decide what the distance is around the figure. You might be asked to find the perimeter of a figure on the piece of graph paper on the coordinate plane. That's very basic. Perimeter on the coordinate plane. Well, maybe they might give you any figure. If a segment runs along the x-axis, is parallel to the x-axis or the y-axis, that's really easy to figure out. That's like one dimension. That's the way we found distance in one dimension. If it doesn't run along the axis, you just have to use the distance formula. So, for example, if you have, let's say you have point, 1, 3. Let's see, this is 4, 3, and this point up here is 1, 8. Let's make it 1, 7. Sorry, 1, 7. And so you have a triangle, and I want to know what the perimeter is. We have a triangle, and I want to know what the perimeter is. So, you could say, okay, well, this segment from 1, 3 to 4, 3, that's 3. That's easy to count. The segment from 1, 3 to 1, 7, that's 4. The question is, how do I find the length of this third side? It doesn't run along the axis. I'm going to have to use distance formula, or because it's on graph paper, I'm going to use Pythagoras theorem. So this distance, so d squared equals 3 squared plus 4 squared. D squared equals 9 plus 16, which is 25. So d is 5. And so I know that the perimeter is 3 plus 4 plus 5, or 12 units. Now, we need to talk about that. The graph paper is great because it's nicely even squares, but it allows us to make it any unit we want. We could call graph paper centimeters or feet or meters. So now the question is, what is area? What exactly is the idea of area? Well, you know it as the space inside the figure. But that's really not mathematical, is it? Now let's think about how you were taught about area. I'm going to move this over. And so let's think about this for a second. How were you taught to find the area? If you think about like in maybe 4th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade, your teacher would give you a piece of graph paper, and maybe there's some objects, and you got a piece of paper, and the teacher would say, how do you find the area, of this figure? How do you find the area? And as a little kid, you'd say, or she'd say, count up the number of squares in the figure, and you'd be like, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, and you would say, okay, the area is 16 unit squares. So that's our working definition for anything. Area really is the number of unit squares contained in a figure. That's basically area. And then you came up with some really interesting formulas, base times height or length times width. For a triangle, it was 1/2 base times height. For a triangle, it was 1/2 base times height. For a circle, it was pi r squared. You came up with a formula for maybe a trapezoid. But in every single case, it was the number of unit squares contained in a figure. Now, we just have to define some things. First of all, what is a square? Do I have a square? Here's a square. I have 2 squares. Here's a square. Here's a square, and here's a square. What is a square, by the way? A square is a 4-sided polygon with congruent sides and angles. And what's a unit square? It's a square whose dimensions are 1 unit by 1 unit. So we can call this a unit, meter square. We could call this an inch square. We can call it a yard square. A kilometer square. So that's the idea. And this works for everything. This is a general definition for all polygons. Actually, it's not for all polygons. It's for all figures. Now that's why finding the area of a rectangle or a square is nice. You get a nice number. But then you have to find the area of a triangle, and that's when fractions start to get introduced. Because you're cutting it in half. You're cutting these squares in half to try to fit them in, and then, trying to find the area of a circle, the pi is introduced, the numbers get really weird, because think about it, you're still trying to fit squares in this figure. What else do I want to say about area? Nothing. Once again, if you have a weird figure over here, let's take this, I'm just going to let you have this weird figure. What does it look like? That. What happens when you take this weird figure? How are we going to find the area? How are we going to find the area, though? I don't know what that is. Well, just chop it up. Just partition it into shapes that you know. This is half a circle. That's a rectangle. That's a rectangle. That's a triangle. That's it. And once again, you have all the techniques for finding the distance and all the lengths. You know how to find the area. Okay, that's it. What's the last thing we need to talk about? The last thing we need to talk about is a circle. A circle is a set of points equidistant from a fixed point Sorry, I'm going a little fast. So you have a center, and you have a bunch of points that are equal distance. The distance from the center to any point, that's known as the radius, right? And another term we're going to talk about, I'm just going to say it, but I'm not going to write it down. A segment that connects two endpoints on the circle that passes through the center, that's known as the diameter. We'll get to this a little bit later. And the only thing I want to talk about now is the circumference. The circumference is like the perimeter of the circle. I shouldn't say that. It's the distance around the circle. And we know the formula is 2 pi r or pi d. And the area of the circle is pi r squared. Just two things. Well, one more thing. When we talk about perimeter or circumference, right, we're talking about units. But when we talk about area, we're talking about units squared. Try to get that right. And just to look ahead, volume is units cubed. So you're going to work on 1/8, 1 through 55 odd, and try the challenge problems.